The faint glow of my bedside lamp cast long shadows across the room as I nervously straightened the books on my shelf for the third time. My bedroom had always been my sanctuary, the one place where I could truly be myself, surrounded by memories pinned to corkboards and dreams scribbled in journals stacked on my desk. Tonight, though, the familiar space felt different, charged with an electricity that made my fingers tremble slightly as I adjusted the angle of a photo frame. The evening had settled into that peculiar limbo between day and night, where time seems to stretch and contract all at once, and every minute feels weighted with possibility. I'd been replaying our earlier conversation in my mind all day, analyzing each word, each lingering glance that passed between us. "Can we talk later? Somewhere private?" he had asked, his voice dropping to that low register that always made my stomach flip. I had nodded, perhaps too eagerly, and suggested my room after everyone had gone to sleep. The party downstairs was still in full swing, music thumping through the floorboards beneath my feet, but all I could focus on was the soft knock I was waiting for. I should tell you about myself, I suppose. I've always been the cautious one, the planner, the one who weighs consequences before leaping. My friends tease me about my color-coded calendar and my inability to be spontaneous. Relationships have never come easily to me. I overthink, I hesitate, I build walls before bridges. But there was something about him that made those walls feel paper-thin, ready to collapse with the slightest touch. And him? Where do I even begin? He moved through life with an effortless confidence that I both envied and admired. Tall enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, with dark curls that fell across his forehead in a way that seemed both careless and perfectly intentional. But it wasn't just his physical presence that drew me to him. It was the way he listened, really listened, when I spoke. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed at my awkward jokes. The way he remembered small details about my life that I'd mentioned only in passing. Our friendship had developed slowly over the past few months, beginning with casual conversations in shared classes and evolving into late-night text exchanges that left me staring at my phone, smiling in the dark. There was an unspoken current running between us, something neither of us had acknowledged out loud, but that seemed to grow stronger with each interaction. I found myself looking for him in crowded rooms, and often discovered his eyes were already on me. The party tonight had been my roommate's idea, a casual gathering that had quickly expanded to fill our small apartment with friends and friends of friends. I had been in the kitchen, mixing another batch of punch, when he appeared beside me, close enough that our arms brushed. "Having fun?" he'd asked, and I'd nodded. Though the truth was I'd been counting the minutes until I could reasonably escape the noise and the small talk. That's when he'd leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, and asked if we could talk later. Alone. The knock, when it finally came, was so soft I almost missed it beneath the muffled bass line from downstairs. I smoothed my shirt, took a deep breath, and opened the door to find him standing there, one hand resting against the doorframe, looking simultaneously at ease and slightly nervous. "Hey," he said, with that half-smile that always made my heart stutter. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, gesturing him into my room with what I hoped was casual nonchalance rather than the jittery anticipation I felt coursing through me. He entered slowly, taking in the details of my personal space, the books lining my shelves, the vintage movie posters, the collection of succulents crowding my windowsill. I suddenly saw my room through his eyes and wondered what it revealed about me. "I like your space," he said, turning to face me. "It feels like you. Is that a good thing?" I asked, aiming for lightness but hearing the vulnerability in my own voice. "Definitely a good thing," he replied, his eyes holding mine for a beat longer than necessary. The party sound seemed to fade further away as we stood there, the air between us thick with unspoken words. I became acutely aware of the door still standing open behind him, an escape route for either of us if courage failed. As if reading my thoughts, he glanced back at it. "Should we?" He gestured vaguely. "Oh, right," I said, moving to close it. My fingers hesitated on the doorknob. Closing it felt significant somehow, a declaration of intent. I took a breath and pushed it shut, then, after another moment's hesitation, turned the lock. The soft click seemed to echo in the quiet room. He and I locked my bedroom door, a simple action that felt monumental in its implications. We were choosing privacy, choosing to be alone together in a way we never had before. The realization sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. We stood facing each other in the center of my room, close enough that I could detect the faint scent of his cologne mingled with the distinct smell that was uniquely him. Neither of us seemed to know how to begin, now that we had created this pocket of privacy for ourselves. I opened my mouth to speak, to fill the charged silence with something. Anything. But before I could form the words, he took a step toward me. One step was all it took to close the distance between us. Another step had me backing up instinctively until I felt the cool surface of my bedroom wall against my back. He moved forward again, slowly, deliberately, giving me every opportunity to step aside if I wanted to. But I didn't want to. I stayed exactly where I was, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain he must hear it. He placed one hand against the wall beside my head, not trapping me, but certainly creating a cocoon of intimacy around us. His other hand remained at his side, as if he was holding himself back, waiting for some sign from me. He was close enough now that I could see the different shades of brown in his irises, the slight stubble along his jaw that had emerged since morning. He and I locked my bedroom door. He pressed me flat to the wall and smiled. It wasn't a predatory smile, not the kind that would have set off warning bells. No, this smile was gentle, almost questioning, with a hint of wonder in it, as if he couldn't quite believe we were here, like this. It was a smile that asked permission, that said he was as nervous as I was despite his confident stance. "I've been wanting to do this for a long time," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me if you want me to stop." I could feel the heat radiating from his body, so close to mine, yet not quite touching except for the gentle pressure of his hand that had now moved to rest lightly on my waist. My mind was racing, thoughts tumbling over each other. Was this really happening? What would this mean tomorrow? What about our friendship? But beneath those anxious questions was a steady, unwavering certainty. I didn't want him to stop. "I don't want you to stop," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. His smile widened, relief and joy mingling in his expression. "Good," he murmured, "because I've been thinking about this moment for months." "You have?" I asked, genuinely surprised. I had been so careful to hide my feelings, convinced they were one-sided. He laughed softly. "Are you kidding? You're all I think about. The way you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you're concentrating. How you always remember everyone's coffee order. The sound of your laugh when you're truly amused, not just being polite." I felt a blush warming my cheeks at his words. It was one thing to hope someone noticed you. It was another thing entirely to hear the specific ways in which you had been seen. "I didn't think you were paying that much attention," I admitted. "I've been paying attention to everything about you," he said, his thumb now tracing small circles on my waist, each movement sending sparks across my skin, even through the fabric of my shirt. "I just wasn't sure if you felt the same way. Let me explain why this matters. This moment of revelation between two people who have been orbiting each other, afraid to acknowledge the gravity pulling them together. There's something uniquely vulnerable about admitting attraction, about laying your feelings bare and risking rejection. It's a leap of faith that requires tremendous courage, especially when friendship is at stake. That's why his confession felt so monumental. He was putting our comfortable dynamic on the line for the chance at something deeper. "I do," I said, the words coming out in a rush of breath. "Feel the same way, I mean. I have for a while now." His free hand came up to cup my cheek, his touch feather-light. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked. I leaned slightly into his palm, drawing comfort from the warmth of his skin against mine. "I was scared," I admitted, "of ruining our friendship, of misreading signals, of everything changing." "And now?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Are you still scared?" I considered the question honestly. "Yes," I said after a moment, but not enough to walk away. Something shifted in his expression then, a deepening of that initial wonder into something more profound. His hand slid from my cheek to the nape of my neck, fingers threading gently through my hair. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice rougher now, edged with desire but still careful, still giving me space to refuse. Instead of answering with words, I closed the last few inches between us, pressing my lips to his in a kiss that started tentative but quickly bloomed into something more urgent. His hand tightened slightly in my hair, while the other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me against him until there was no space left between our bodies. I felt the solid wall behind me and his equally solid presence before me. And for perhaps the first time in my life, I stopped thinking entirely and simply felt. The kiss seemed to last both an eternity and not nearly long enough. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "Wow," he whispered, and I couldn't help but laugh softly at the simple eloquence of that single word. "Yeah," I agreed. "Wow." He opened his eyes then, meeting mine with such naked affection that it made my chest ache. "I've imagined that so many times," he confessed, "but reality is so much better." "You've imagined kissing me?" I asked, still somewhat disbelieving despite the evidence of his interest currently pressed against me. He laughed, the sound vibrating through his chest and into mine. "Among other things," he said with a hint of mischief in his tone that made heat pool low in my stomach. But then his expression grew more serious. "But I don't want to rush this. You're too important to me." I felt something inside me melt at his words. In a world that often prioritizes physical connection over emotional intimacy, his desire to take things slowly felt like a rare and precious gift. "Thank you," I said simply, knowing he would understand what I meant. He stepped back slightly, though his hands remained on my waist, maintaining our connection. "Do you want to sit down?" he asked, nodding toward my bed. "Just to talk," he added quickly. "I feel like there's so much we should say to each other." I nodded, appreciating both the suggestion and the clarification. We moved to sit on the edge of my bed, close enough that our thighs touched, a point of contact that felt both casual and thrillingly new. For a moment, we sat in silence, adjusting to this new reality where we could touch freely, where the feelings we had kept hidden were now acknowledged. "So," he said finally, taking my hand and interlacing our fingers, "where do we go from here?" It was the question I had been both anticipating and dreading. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I've never been good at this part." "Which part is that?" he asked, his thumb stroking the back of my hand in a gesture that was somehow both soothing and electrifying. "The beginning," I said. "The defining things. The figuring out what we are to each other now." He considered this for a moment. "Do we need to define it right away? Can't we just be together and see where it leads?" I felt a familiar anxiety rise in me at the ambiguity. "I'm not great with uncertainty," I admitted. "I like knowing where I stand." He squeezed my hand gently. "Okay, then let me be clear. I'm crazy about you. I want to date you exclusively. I want to take you out and hold your hand in public and introduce you as my significant other. I want to learn everything about you that I don't already know. Is that defined enough?" His directness startled a laugh out of me. "Yes," I said, feeling the anxiety dissolve under the warmth of his declaration. "That's definitely defined enough." "And is it what you want too?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability showing through his confident exterior. I nodded, suddenly feeling shy despite everything we had already shared. "It's exactly what I want." His smile then was radiant, transforming his entire face. He leaned forward to kiss me again, this time a soft, sweet press of lips that felt like a promise. When he pulled back, he kept his face close to mine. "Can I tell you something?" he asked, his voice low. "Anything," I replied, meaning it completely. "I've never felt this way about anyone before," he said, the words clearly costing him something to admit. "It scares me a little, how much I care about you already." I felt my heart expand in my chest at his confession. "It scares me too," I told him. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe the things most worth having are a little frightening." He nodded slowly, considering my words. "You're very wise, you know that." I laughed. "Not wise. Just overthinking everything as usual." "No," he said, suddenly serious. "Don't do that. Don't diminish yourself. It's one of the things that drives me crazy, how you never seem to see how amazing you are." His words caught me off guard, touching on an insecurity so fundamental I hadn't realized how visible it was. "I'm working on it," I said softly. "Good," he replied, "because from where I'm sitting, you're pretty incredible." We talked for hours after that, sitting cross-legged on my bed facing each other, our knees touching, hands frequently reaching out to establish contact, a touch to emphasize a point, fingers brushing hair back from a face, palms pressed together as if measuring the difference in our hand sizes. We shared stories we'd never told each other before, revealed fears and dreams, laughed until our sides hurt, and occasionally fell into comfortable silences that felt as intimate as our conversations. The party below had long since quieted, the house settling into the deep stillness of late night. Neither of us mentioned the time or suggested ending our conversation. It felt too precious, this newfound honesty between us, as if we were making up for all the months of holding back. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said during one of our quiet moments. "After everything we've talked about tonight, I think we're well past the point of personal questions being off limits." I replied with a smile. He laughed, acknowledging the truth of this. "Fair point. I was just wondering, when did you know that you had feelings for me? I mean," I thought back, trying to pinpoint the exact moment. "There wasn't one specific moment," I said slowly. "It was more like a gradual realization. But if I had to choose, remember that day at the coffee shop when it was pouring rain, and you gave your umbrella to that elderly woman at the bus stop, even though it meant you got soaked?" He nodded, looking surprised. "That's when you knew?" "Something shifted that day," I explained. "Seeing your kindness, your instinct to help without hesitation or expectation of thanks, it moved something in me. I think I'd been attracted to you before that, but that's when I started to fall for you." His expression softened. "I had no idea. What about you?" I asked, curious now. "When did you know?" He didn't hesitate. "The night we stayed up talking on the phone until sunrise. You were telling me about your childhood dream of becoming a marine biologist, and you got so excited explaining about this documentary you'd seen on deep-sea creatures. Your voice was all animated, and even though I couldn't see your face, I could picture exactly how your eyes would be lighting up. And I remember thinking, I want to hear this voice every day for the rest of my life." It kind of blindsided me, actually. I felt my cheeks warm at his words. "That was months ago," I said, realizing the implications. "Yeah," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "I've been carrying this around for a while. Why didn't you say anything sooner?" I asked. He shrugged, looking down at our joined hands. "Same reasons as you, I guess. Fear of rejection, not wanting to mess up our friendship. And," he hesitated, "and," I prompted gently, "and I wanted to be sure," he said finally, meeting my eyes again. "Not of my feelings, I was certain about those. But I needed to be sure I could be what you deserve, that I wouldn't hurt you." The raw honesty in his voice made my throat tight with emotion. "And are you?" "Sure, I mean, I can't promise I'll never hurt you," he said, his thumb tracing patterns on my palm. "That wouldn't be realistic. But I can promise I'll try my hardest not to. That I'll always be honest with you. That I'll never take you for granted." In that moment, with moonlight now streaming through my window and casting silver patterns across my bedspread, I felt something settle in me. A certainty I had rarely experienced in my often anxious life. "That's enough for me," I said simply. He smiled, bringing our joined hands to his lips and pressing a kiss to my knuckles. "It's getting late," he observed, though he made no move to leave. "Stay?" I asked, the word coming out before I could overthink it. "Just to sleep," I clarified quickly. "I'm not ready for this night to end yet." His expression was tender as he nodded. "I'd like that." We adjusted ourselves on the bed, lying down facing each other, still fully clothed, with just enough space between us to be comfortable, but close enough to feel each other's warmth. He reached out to brush a strand of hair from my face, his touch lingering on my cheek. "Is this real?" I whispered, suddenly overwhelmed by the evening's transformation. "It's real," he assured me, his voice equally soft in the darkness. "I'm real. We're real." I shifted closer, resting my head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart under my ear. His arm came around me, holding me securely against him, and I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. "Good night," he murmured into my hair, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Good night," I replied, already feeling sleep tugging at the edges of my consciousness. As I drifted off, I thought about how a single evening could change everything. How the simple act of closing a door and sharing truths could open up an entirely new future. There would be challenges ahead, no doubt. We would need to navigate the shift in our relationship, figure out how to balance our individual lives with this new connection, learn each other's boundaries and triggers and needs. But in that moment, with his heartbeat as my lullaby and his arms as my sanctuary, those challenges felt like adventures waiting to be embraced rather than obstacles to be feared. We had taken the hardest step already, admitting our feelings, crossing the threshold from friendship to something more. Everything else, we would figure out together, day by day. And as sleep finally claimed me, I realized that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't overthinking the future or analyzing the past. I was simply present in the moment, grateful for the brave words and tender touches that had brought us to this point. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side, having already conquered the greatest challenge of all, the courage to be vulnerable, to reach for happiness even at the risk of heartbreak. In the quiet of my bedroom, with the door still locked against the outside world, we had created our own universe, one where fear gave way to hope and longing transformed into belonging. And in the morning, when we woke to sunlight streaming through my windows and shy smiles exchanged across my pillow, that universe would expand to include the day ahead and all the days that followed, days filled with discovery and growth, with arguments and reconciliations, with ordinary moments made extraordinary by the simple fact of being shared. But that was for tomorrow. For now, there was just this, the gentle rhythm of synchronized breathing, the warmth of bodies finding comfort in proximity, and the profound peace that comes from knowing that after all the waiting and wondering, you have finally found your way home. Total _char_count, 17,849.